This is Christian Buckley with another MVP Buzz Chat, and I'm here today with Treb. Treb, how you doing today?
I am doing well today, Christian. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. And for folks that don't know you, why don't you tell us who you are, where you are, what you do?
All right. My name is Treb Gatte, and I am a Power BI data platform MVP based in the Seattle area. And I also have a company called Marquee Insights. And so our goal is basically help you make better decisions with smarter data. And so that's going to be one of the things we're going to talk more about today is what are people trying to answer? And with that, I hand it back to you.
Yeah, well, and so Treb's one of those people. I've known Treb for, I don't know how many years, almost a decade, some long time. They're part of the Puget Sound SharePoint user group and in the community. And so, Treb, I think we had you in as a presenter a number of times in the user group over the years on various topics. And you kind of made your transition from, you were originally a project server or MS Project MVP.
Yeah.
And moved over.
5 years, actually.
Wow.
Yeah. Time flies when you're having fun, I guess. What we found, though, is with project, most of the interest around project wasn't so much in managing the projects, it was in driving the reporting. And, realistically, if I can't get good reports out of the work I'm doing, the solution doesn't really add a lot of value. And we were starting to see the same thing with SharePoint. We're starting to see the same thing with Teams and all of the other products, is that really when it comes down to it, I need visibility into what's going on and is it helping me answer a question that I need to have answered within my own organization? Otherwise, we're not driving the business forward.
Well, it's interesting. I think just like you, my path into collaboration technology was also through the project and portfolio management solutions.
Yeah.
And exactly that. It wasn't just about, it was more about building out like decision support systems, because companies that I worked for and clients when I started consulting said, look, I can go and get project updates. If I push my people like on Friday, update the status of projects. That's not what I want. What I want to know is that data reflected against historical project data, what is the likelihood that we'll deliver these on time, or the average delivery date of a project or a product,
or even when am I going to have this done? The funny thing about all of this was actually one of the biggest use cases for Project Server and Project Online is not project management, it's resource management. Because everybody's trying to answer that same question of when will this get done? When can I schedule it? And I've actually been doing a little playing around. There is this, it's a private beta right now, but even though I can invite people into it, called calendar.help. This is the Cortana scheduling service. And it turns out that when you schedule me to a task in Planner, I kick off a flow that sends something to the Cortana help service, and it puts it on my calendar wherever there's free time. And so at some point, we were trying to model people's times with a schedule. I don't think we're that far away from actually having the machine do it for us. And so the role of the project manager is going to change tremendously.
Yeah, but that's interesting, that because now we're going into kind of the other part of my history, like was my kind of backed myself into creating a social graph. What we were trying to do was we were trying to, again, in the project portfolio management, we were trying to do a kind of workload optimization for project-based organizations to understand that doing pattern recognition on, hey, this project you're working on today is a 75% match to this project that was completed a year ago. And these were the assets, but here's the various resources that were needed. And so you can start to see when the system recognizes those patterns, it realizes that, hey, on average, it takes this long, X amount of time to finish that task. Then it can go and do the population, because it's not enough just, hey, somebody in Planner assigns a task to me. Well, how long is that task going to take to complete? Would be the missing piece there.
Well, and that's where I make some base assumptions, and, trying to automate this, just like a mechanic. They know approximately if it's a low priority task, it'll be X amount of time. If it's medium, it'll be this. If high, and we finally got the priority field this week. I'm so happy about this with Planner. I saw the announcement. But we can use that now to say, oh, it's low priority, so make it a half hour or make it 15 minutes. If it's medium, make it an hour. At least then I can determine how much more time I need to focus on it. If it's high priority, make it 2 hours, and then I can see when I can get to it. But I think this is all part of the slow automation of the grunt work. Now, the gap that we're still seeing is, am I working on the right stuff? And this has been the holy grail for years. And we've had several attempts at what we call portfolio management. But again, we're trying to model human behavior that's happening in real time, but we're doing it once a month, once a quarter, once a year, and it isn't adding as much value as we would hope. And that's why when we're looking at BI in general, it's about how do we get our hands around this whole thing. And this is bringing up much greater questions around what is the data that we're capturing? What are the learnings that we're getting out of that data? And really, what are the actions that we're driving forward with this? And one of the challenges that I see a lot of companies that are having is when they're starting off, they're very tactical. Oh, I need a status report, or I need this. They're not thinking at a higher level. And Deloitte did a study recently where they said, you know what, we've been doing this now for 20 years, trying to get BI out there. And I think the percentage was 63% of people are reverting back to spreadsheets. It's like, we're doing something. We're missing something here, somewhere in all of this. And so we have this conversation-centric design process that we've rolled out. We have a book that we put out on Amazon to help spread the word about it. But at least what we were trying to do was start with the conversations that people are having. We're inherently social. This is everything that we do at work. We have meetings, we have project team get-togethers, we get together to solve a problem. Let's at least start with that context and then see what data are we capturing, what data do we need to drive these forward. But then as we start to gather these, and this is where a friend of mine, Steve Flynn, has been working. He's got his data to learning to action program that I love it. And it also fits in very well with what we're doing, where his conjecture is basically, are we having the right conversations? Are we having the right learning? And are we driving the right actions forward? Because realistically, in this new data-centric age that we're in, your last best competitive advantage is being able to learn faster than the other person. And this is really what Amazon does for retail. They have learned faster than Walmart. They're beating them to death over it. When you start looking at what other companies are doing, the market leaders in almost every segment are very data-centric. And in fact, one of the things we'd like to say is, how do you know you're in a data-centric organization? And I say, well, data has a voice. Because the first question that people will ask in a meeting is, what does the data say? And so that kind of lends that, data has a place at the table, it's part of the conversation, it's front and center. We're not doing management by emotion anymore. Oh, it feels like this. And, it's one of those things too, there was the story of how the Frappuccino got started. Because Starbucks, they sell coffee. We love coffee. God knows we love it here in the Seattle area. But not a lot of coffee gets, sold, I would say, in the early afternoon because you'll be up all night. But it turns out that when you look at who was in the stores at that time, most bus stops are outside of a Starbucks. So your average age would fall into the lower teens, and Starbucks at the time didn't have a product for them. So lo and behold, here's the Frappuccino, and now you have this dead zone for most coffee shops that's being filled by an alternative product based on the data that they were gathering. Yeah. I have another client, they do inspections of these big hard assets, and they do this for power companies, and essentially what we found was the data that they were generating from this activity was actually worth more than the activity itself that they were charging for, because they could resell it and help utility companies do better purchase decisions. They could feed it back to the manufacturers and say, given these situations, here's the problems we're seeing. We can help you reduce your warranty calls and all this other stuff. And these are the types of things that I don't think most people are even beginning to think about, that we're just generating data for tactical reasons, but we're sitting on a gold mine. And so this is one of the things that we're doing these executive retreats now with companies to get their executives up to speed. Think more broadly, when you say, oh, I need a dashboard, let's talk about the decisions that you're trying to drive let's make sure they're the right decisions. Let's talk about the conversations that they're going to integrate with so that we get that adoption. And then let's see if we even have the data. A lot of times we have a lot of wishful thinking. Oh, I want this. We're not capturing it. Okay, well, that's a problem. But it's amazing to see the results when all of this stuff aligns, because now we're having, it's almost like that holy grail that we've been looking for with collaboration and BI, and project management. We've been nibbling at it, but it's having that same conversation from end to end within the organization. And
so
it's a beautiful thing.
I have to ask though, because one of the dangers is that so I agree with all of the points that you made. I've also seen specific examples of where organizations will go and try to watch the data more closely, but they almost give up the management ownership of certain activities. Like, well, the data says this. It's like, that's only part of the story around what you're seeing. A prime example is in support operations, and looking at number of tickets that are opened, how long it takes to close a ticket, the average number of tickets closed per agent, the amount of time, the mean time to resolution of each of those ticket closures. And it's easy to go and look at that and say, well, hey, are high performers, low performers based on the volume, the overall throughput, and then you can maybe balance that with your like the customer satisfaction survey against that. So there's a quality factor there. But even then, it may not completely tell the difference. And I mean, I have very specific experience with that issue with a management team that was saying, well, hey, we've got a couple low performing people based on all of those metrics, which largely was true and were valid measurements. What they weren't showing is that these individuals were consistently taking on the worst, the ugliest problems. So the mean time to resolution went long, the number of tickets resolved went down. They had the unhappiest clients because they took the problem tickets.
Right.
So that's, and I'm just using that as an example. And for a lot of transactional stuff, so a lot of times, like you can't look at all those data factors as being their nirvana for solving all management issues. You can't just abdicate the throne over to your dashboard, but be informed by those things. But I don't know if that also comes up in your
it comes up quite a bit, because you have to be careful what you're measuring. And again, you have to take it into context as to the whole thing. Why, for me, having the person's, instead of reacting, ask the question why first. Why is this happening? Because that's really where the management value comes into play, is using their experience, using their background, looking at the data, going, okay, we have a situation. Why is this happening? And even we see this in lean. If you've done a lean journey, you have the 5 whys to get to the root of the question. And the thing is, what appears to be going on may not actually be going on. The other problem you run into is what I call the too quick to act problem. Because as we're getting into more real-time data, you're not giving people enough time to solve the problem before it becomes your problem. And so you have, your directors and VPs getting involved before the managers have even had a chance to look at stuff. So these are all the types of issues that we're starting to run into, I should say, because, okay, we've now got visibility, but we've got too much visibility, and we're also jumping to conclusions too quickly about things before we're really digging into the data. So in my mind, I still think it's better to have the data, it's better to have the visibility, but it's a learning experience. And one of the things that we so totally have to get past is the red. We have to embrace the red. If we have red indicators, if we have variances, that's normal, that's reality, because realistically, in a lot of cases, we're trying to predict the future. And if I was really good at predicting the future, I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be on a beach enjoying a very nice adult beverage right now, enjoying my riches, because I would have the stock market corner.
Well, I'd also say if you're not seeing red or at least yellows, if it's green all the time, they'd be like, I don't think, is this thing, like click, 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 is this thing on?
Yeah. I want to have variance. And that's the other thing too, is so much of what we do today is rear view mirror reporting. And we snapshot, okay, this is what last week looked like. We were yellow, okay, and I need to know, are we yellow trending green, yellow trending red, yellow trending yellow? We don't have this time phased aspect to a lot of our data. We're just capturing snapshots. And while those make nice family vacation albums, they don't really help you run your business very well. And so this is also another thing that we've got to get our heads around, is how do we add this time phase aspect to our data? And it's just taking people a long time. And as you can tell with all this, I think the largest challenge we're running into is the fact that most people have had zero training in thinking about this in a data-centric manner. We have people who have hard times making a decent table in Excel, and now we're asking them to use a tool like Power BI. Wow, how do we get there? We have people, I mean, I'm not exactly a spring chicken, but we have people in the workforce who've never really had to do more than Excel and sort of learned it as they went along. They were enterprising in their learning, but this is completely different. So we're actually seeing a lot of companies who are bringing us in. We are doing wholesale training, training hundreds of people in how to even start thinking about this from a data perspective. What is the stuff we need to be capturing? What decisions, what conversations? And then finally, now we start looking at a report, or we start looking at a dashboard. Or better yet, I just want an answer. Power Q&A, you just type in the question that writes the answer for you. I don't need a report. And so it's a different mentality, but we're taking baby steps to get there.
Right. Well, it's interesting. It's again, just had this conversation with a client this morning, and part of the problem that we ran into is, I said, it was essentially we kind of got to that same point where, like, what are we really trying to understand here about the data? And what we found is that what we're looking for is almost kind of it's data that's combining from two entirely different systems. It's not right now. We're just kind of doing the guesswork in between to match these things up. I say we need to bring these two data sets together to be able to begin to build out that dashboard and to get that directional information about how we're performing from these systems. I think people are really overly reliant on out of the box, like what's there, what can I go and plug in and do. And so much of my experience in this space, and certainly back from the program project management, portfolio management world, is that what you're looking for, the answers are never out of the box.
Some are.
Well,
but the good stuff isn't.
15 years ago, nothing was out of the box.
Right.
There was no out of the box. It was very much had to have a data scientist involved. But I'm actually happy to see that push that Microsoft went through, saying that, hey, for the product team, the marketing organizations, the sales organizations, hiring of data scientists, the people that understood, that captured the telemetry around the product, and we're looking the data around this. I just thought, and the guidance was from Microsoft, hey, all of you need to be doing something similar. Take that same mindset. And so that's good.
But I think, so we have quick start products that we sell, but the reason that they're selling is not so much the final reporting. Like, we do have built-in reports, especially like our project management package that we have. We surveyed a bunch of PMO directors and said, look, given unlimited time and money, what is it you absolutely need to run your business? And so it turned out there was about an 85% overlap in this survey. And these were common things like status reports. Good God, we waste a lot of time creating status reports over and over again. They were basic views over the data. But realistically, what they were looking for was a starting point to get to the point where they can start writing their own reports. And at least with Power BI, we can create these pre-built data models that have already been tested. They've already been optimized for speed. You're not having to plow the field fresh every time. And what we saw was other bids to do the same work were 18 to 20 weeks of work just to get to the point where you could write a report. We're talking about, you could start doing that this week kind of thing. So I think there is an opportunity space there. But this is where the real value starts to be, is that you take a package like that, you integrate with your own data, and then you start focusing on those conversations that you want to support. And again, that becomes another discussion point. I can't do it all, and nor do I want to do it all, but I need to pick the most important ones and start working from there, because now you start getting into how many different systems do I have to get in place? Are we talking about the same thing, even though we're calling it the same term? I remember one of the projects we had I used to work at Starbucks, that's why I'm saying this. We wanted to look at product.
Well, you also live in Seattle. I think you're legally obligated to mention it 4 or 5 times.
But you think about it, it's like, if you're in the store, a cup of coffee is a product. If you're at Safeway, it's a bag of coffee. And if you're at the Hilton, it's a case of these little K-cup. How do you compare that? And that's fairly common, is that we'll have common terminology in the company, but we're not actually talking about the same thing. And we had this recently with a very large healthcare company, where what they were defining as projects and efforts and tasks and milestones weren't the same across even this one program. And so we have to go through this Tower of Babel problem and get everybody speaking the same language, and then move on from there. So some of the BI stuff is actually forcing these things to happen, which I think is good. Yep. But it's taking people, we spent right at a year getting to the point where now they can cycle through and create stuff, very quickly. But it wasn't, all unicorns and rainbows, as some of the demos tend to lead you to believe. It's a lot of work to get there, but the payoff is massive. So.
Well, you're right. I mean, making those investments and the insights. I mean, look, there's never an end to that in my experience. I mean, it's because when you get that information, you're like, hey, this is fantastic. Mm-hmm. What happens is that your then requirements mature. You're like, okay, now that we understand that, we realize that half the questions we were asking were wrong.
Right.
We have
correct.
And then you go on. And this is just part of the. I'm a fan of W. Edwards Deming. It's the optimizing the system. There is no end to that, because you optimize, you create a new baseline, and then you look at how do we perform over and above that.
And your bottleneck moves at that point too.
Correct. So yeah. And so you start, your output increases, the quality increases, and all of that. Okay, then you need to look at, okay, now how do we improve from there? So, there is no like the top. Hey, we're optimized, we're done.
Well, and that's part of, but I think that's one of the things that the whole BI movement, and BI is the lead into AI, where we're automating this to a certain extent, is that we are the bottleneck, that we have optimized our processes, but we've not optimized our ability to capture knowledge and how do we learn from that knowledge. And that was really the hope of BI, was to at least make the data clearer. When we get into AI, that's where essentially, I think what people are missing is that we're trying to reduce the learning curve. There was a product that was released a few months ago. It's a photography software package that takes the combined experience of 50 professional photographers and embeds it into this AI package. You point your camera at the scene, it analyzes it, gives you all the settings. Voila, you have a professional looking photo from this package. You're never going to achieve that level of expertise, but we can now embed that into AI and extend it. And what we were working toward is I've heard the term thrown around, I don't think Microsoft has made it very public yet, is collaborative intelligence. So this is where you augment the capabilities of the human with the machine. And the first instance we're seeing of this is actually in PowerPoint. If you've used the designer that's built in, I love that thing. Well, imagine, I want that for Word, I want this for Excel, I want this for, all the mundane stuff that we do just to get the stuff correct. But I can see this being extended even further when we get to the point where you don't have to go through, 4 or 6 weeks of training to get to do your job, where we can embed, at least the most mundane things into the machine. You'll be more effective much more quickly. And so I think there's going to be a lot of energy around this in the next probably 2 to 5 years.
Well, it goes back to what we were originally talking about, was that task automation. For the system to go in there and say, hey, well, look, out of Planner, this task for it to go and look at and understand, okay, hey, you know, Treb, this is you, your profile, or you know, so you sign something to me. So
Right.
it understands me in the system, my role, assigns me the task, goes and based on what it has seen from others with my title with this similar task, puts a time estimate around it. Maybe it also knows that, hey, Christian is more efficient than most, and it's he's like 10 minutes or 10% more optimized than the typical PM, and maybe adjust based on those factors. I mean, there's a lot of intelligence you can put in there with the assignment. I mean, you know, look, part of me looks at that future saying, not only, hey, block out the time. So I've got literally my task list of what I need to work on. And the system would even recognize that Christian needs 5 minutes in between each of these to kind of reset, especially if I'm changing to a different client or to whatever, or to another type of task. I mean, all that kind of stuff, those buffers and things that it can, you know, put in there. But again, maybe I don't need that. It knows that I don't need that. It's going to just put task, you know, for 2-3 hours. And then, you know, I just have my list of tickets to go through to solve these problems.
This is where I'd love to see it like tied to Windows, where when I context switch, say between clients or between projects or whatnot, Windows would actually give me a different desktop that it generated with all the content there already. So I don't have to go looking for it.
Right.
And I think one of the other things, while we're on this topic, and I was trying to remember which conference this was. I don't remember if it was Ignite or a SharePoint conference, but they were demoing what was coming with SharePoint. And Naomi Moneypenny was doing this demo of machine teaching. And I don't think people really got what that was about.
That was the SharePoint conference.
It was SharePoint,
yeah.
Sorry, it's like there's been so many, it just feels like a blur now.
Yeah.
But if you haven't seen it, I would suggest, you know, having someone, you know, go back and watch the video. But this is how I think we're going to be transferring knowledge to the machine in a more efficient way. Because right now, if you've done anything with machine learning, it's, you know, it in the right context, it works very well. But it's hard to really get it to do some of the things that we as humans can pick up very naturally. And so I think you're going to see more emphasis on this as another way of automating, you know, those mundane tasks. And given the economic outlooks that I've been seeing, where, you know, we might be in the middle of a recession next year, companies are going to be in that mindset of, you know, if they started now, what things can you invest in to help yourself become more efficient a year from now, when you absolutely need to be more efficient? And what we're seeing is we're seeing a huge uptake in RPA, robotic process automation, where again, very mundane processes. If we can have the machine do it, let's do that. We're having a lot of focus on BI, looking for answers to specific questions. And so I think from a company perspective, now is the time to be looking to make those efficiency type investments, because you're going to need them, according to all the economists, roughly a year out from now. So, you know, and that's the feedback we're getting from our clients right now. That's the kind of stuff they're looking for. Exciting.
Well, I'm not so negative on my outlook of that, of the economy, but I understand. I agree with that concept of, you know, invest in these things, because again, it's not just about, hey, we're in a downturn, let's look at being more efficient with this. But I think ongoing, to be competitive, you've got to be continually looking at these things anyway. Oh, just for those that are that didn't catch that, the keynote we were talking about. So that was actually part of the SharePoint conference in Las Vegas in May 2019. So Naomi was part of that keynote, and it's team teaching.
It's toward the end of it, yeah.
But it's also part of it's the SharePoint, the virtual summit. It was the same, that keynote from that event. Right. You can find that out online and that recording out there.
Yeah, well, maybe we can find the link and
I'll
get
take
people to it. Yeah. But it was fascinating. I guess the thing with the economists is, you know, we're nearing the end of a normal business cycle. So it doesn't necessarily mean doom and gloom. It's just, this is the natural ebb and flow that goes on. So sure. I get that. But yeah, there's a lot of exciting things going on in BI. I want people, if I leave them with anything, it's to realize that business intelligence is not reporting. It's not just that. If all you wind up doing when you adopt Power BI is taking your spreadsheet and putting it on a web page, you're not going to get the value out of that. You're just simply changing the tools. And I see people doing some very honestly bad practices on, oh, well, I can just share the PBIX file in a SharePoint folder because I don't have to pay a license for that. If you do that, you're just simply recreating the problem you had with spreadsheets to begin with, which is anybody can change the data. Or worse, that person you're getting ready to fire, they just backed up the whole library and they walked out the door with it. So there's data leak problems. So you're avoiding a $10 a month problem and creating a $1,000 or $10,000, an instance problem in doing so. And what I like to tell people is, look, if we can't generate $120 of value per person to use this tool set, we're not doing something right. And time after time after time, we have been able to go in, solve usually 2-3 key problems that are just sucking everybody's time with automating it through something like Power BI, our report server, and proving the value right there. And once people get the hang of this, it's almost like they get excited, they get addicted, they want more, and then the real fun starts. Then we really start to learn more about your business and how we can make things better. So I love it. I am so pumped about this.
I had to say again that, back in the mid-90s where I was kind of introduced to this very expensive, very limited knowledge out in the world was around the decision support systems. And of course we were just scratching the surface of what we can do even as an individual consumer, and the price points have come down for the tools, the power, where I was going and deploying front-end tools to these massive data warehouses, business objects and the SaaS modules, all these kinds of things. And I know you've talked about a lot of people. I just did a webinar with John White and did a similar MVP Buzz chat with him where we're talking about the democratization of business intelligence.
Yeah,
and that's what we're talking about here with these systems. It's incredible what we can go in and do, but it does take some education and the time to go in there and understand. And often is the case, we've got fantastic data that we're capturing, but it may not be everything that we need for the insights that we're trying to get. So back to the beginning, it's where I would always start my conversations back in the 90s as a business analyst and then project manager, which was, what are you trying to accomplish? Technology aside, what are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to learn from this? And then walk me through the process and the logic of the tools that you're using to better understand what you're doing and why you're not getting those answers today. And then let's talk about how we get the answers that you're looking for.
Yeah, and it is really the key thing that you have to have an answer. You have to have a question. You can't just be collecting data for the heck of it. And the other point of this is it takes time. Think about when you first learn to use a computer or you learn to drive. I think learning to drive may actually be a better analogy here. It isn't like you can go in and take, a 2-day class in driving it. Hey, I'm done. No, you have to actually go do it. You have to actually have people. I know my son's getting just wrapped up his.
I'm making faces at them. Just do it.
Like, I'm not ready to turn him loose.
Clearly, there's people out there, Treb, driving around that have only done maybe 2 days.
I'm not even sure they did. They finished the second day.
I know.
The ones on 90 this morning, but realistically, you're better drivers. We'll put it that way. At least have somebody mentoring them, helping them through this. And that's the thing. You really, we've done this for clients, but you need to find those mentors. And even if it's just people within your own company who can do that, you have to have those leads to be leading the charge. And just, don't expect, to solve world hunger and world peace in 6 weeks. It's going to take, like I said, with that one client, it took a year and they're still not done. It continues on. Because realistically, we're all just IT companies that happen to either provide services or, make a product. Even Starbucks, if you looked at where they are today versus where they were 5 years ago, they're highly IT-centric. I mean, Kevin Johnson is the head of the company now, and he's ex-Microsoft. That should tell you right there how different the environment is. And over and over again, we're seeing this in a lot of companies. IT is, it's not just a back office operation anymore. It's an enabler of where we take the company from here.
Yeah. Well, Treb, I mean, talking about mentoring, talking about getting help, how can people find out more and get your help? And I know, I mean, you guys do a lot, you write a lot, you've got a lot of great content that's out there. So how can people find out more about what you do?
The easiest way, we have a brand new website I'm very thrilled about. It's at marqueeinsights.com. And it has essentially what we do as far as offerings for education and mentoring. It has our products, and it also has the other things that we do. We try not to do everything, so doing custom development is one of those things we can help you with, but it's not our forte. Our forte is really working with the organization to decide, where do I want to make the investments? Where do I want to drive it forward? How do I want to make the company better? And so look for the executive retreats that are coming up. We're going to have a couple of those in various locations around the US. And I think those are going to be of interest to a lot of companies. So details are still coming together. Very
cool. But so in the meantime, how do people follow you, find out more about you, Treb, the man, the person?
So Twitter, I would say Twitter is the place to be. So it's TGATTE on Twitter. And you're going to probably get some random stuff. I do, as part of my trying to help myself become more creative, I'm learning to cook like a real person, not just, through the microwave, actually, making brews and stuff. So you'll sometimes get random posts about that and other stuff, but I try to keep it focused mainly on the technology. So, and it's good to follow up on that because there's just a wealth of knowledge out there, and it's very much a fire hose these days. Stuff.
It is. Well, Treb, hey, really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to talk, and really appreciate it and enjoyed the conversation.
Oh, thanks. It was a lot of fun, and I hope it was good for you too.